Okay, team, let's dive in. I've been swimming in reports, surveys, and institutional data from the last 18 months, and the picture of higher education right now is, well, it's vibrating. It's not just changing. It's changing at a pace that the data suggests many institutions are fundamentally unprepared for. The central tension is screaming off the page, a massive push for innovation, particularly around AI, slamming directly into the bedrock of academic tradition. But the most urgent finding isn't the tension itself. It's the critical gap in our understanding of the long-term pedagogical impact of all this frantic adoption.
Which means we're building the plane while flying it, and we don't have the blueprints for what a successful flight even looks like yet.
Exactly. And the passengers, the students, are giving us mixed signals. Some are thrilled with the new in-flight entertainment. Others are getting airsick, which is why I asked Isha to join us. Aisha, you're a computer science senior, you've TA'd for intro courses, and you've seen this from both sides of the lectern. What's the vibration on the ground?
It's chaotic, honestly. In one class, I have a professor who has completely redesigned his software engineering course around AI pair programming. We're encouraged to use Copilot and ChatGPT to generate code, debug, and write documentation, but then we have to do a code review presentation where we explain every line the AI wrote, why we kept it, or how we changed it. It's actually harder than just writing it from scratch sometimes, but I'm learning a different skill, like being a manager and an editor for an AI junior dev.
That's fascinating. That's moving from prohibition to preparation, like that McMaster University report talked about. They framed it as shifting from don't cheat to here's how to use this tool with integrity and skill.
Right. But then in my very next class, it's the opposite. The syllabus has a bold, red, all-caps section. Any use of generative AI constitutes academic dishonesty and will result in an F, full stop. So in one building, I'm being trained for the future of work. In the next, I'm being treated like I'm trying to get away with something just by thinking about it. The whiplash is real, and as a TA, I see the confusion. Students come to my office hours for the AI-friendly class, asking for clarity on the boundaries. And students from the AI-prohibited class come asking for help on things an AI could solve in 2 seconds, but they're terrified to even look it up.
That disparity is the data. It's not a smooth gradient of adoption. It's a jagged landscape of extremes. And the study from the pre-service teachers really highlighted this. They were exploring universal design for learning and AI, and found that even the next generation of educators, these digital natives training to teach, are deeply conflicted. They can see the incredible potential for creating multiple means of engagement and representation, like instantly generating alternative text formats or simplifying complex texts for different learners.
Which is the core of UDL, removing barriers before students even encounter them.
But these future teachers also voiced major concerns about over-reliance, about losing the human touch in crafting learning experiences, and about equity. Who has access to the best AI tools? That tension between innovation and tradition isn't just between old and young faculty. It's internal, inside the people who are about to enter the system.
And that internal conflict makes perfect sense to me from my classroom days. Teaching is an act of relationship and careful curation. When you find a text that perfectly illuminates a concept for a student, or you design an assignment that finally makes something click, there's a profound human satisfaction in that. The fear, I think, is that AI turns that curation into a commodity. Why spend hours designing a scaffolded writing assignment when an AI can generate 10 variations in minutes? But the answer is because you spent those hours. The intentionality is the pedagogy.
But is that scalable? That's what I hear a lot of students asking. We have huge class sizes, overworked professors, and underpaid TAs. If a tool can help provide more personalized feedback or generate practice problems, isn't that a net good? The problem is when it's used as a substitute, not a supplement. My AI-friendly prof calls it pedagogical integrity. The tool doesn't replace the learning objective. It becomes a new part of the pathway to get there. Instead of writing a first draft, the assignment might be to take an AI-generated draft and radically improve its argument, fact-check every claim, and elevate the prose. That's a different and maybe more relevant writing skill.
That reframing, from seeing AI-generated work as a finished product to seeing it as a raw material, is a huge institutional transformation that many schools are just beginning to articulate. The French language report on generative AI in higher education put it well. It said we need to move from a paradigm of suspicion to one of pedagogical accompaniment. But that requires massive support for faculty development, which brings us to the resource constraints.
Always. The community college where I taught could never have the same AI initiative as a big R1 university. We didn't have the IT infrastructure, the teaching centers, the grant money to experiment. So you get even more disparity. A student at a well-funded university gets trained in ethical, critical AI use as part of their composition class. A student at a resource-strapped college might just get the prohibition because the institution doesn't have the capacity to do the more nuanced, prepared approach. That replicates inequity in a whole new way.
And even at an R1, it's patchy. It depends on which department you're in, which professor you get. There's no consensus. As a student, you're left to build your own ethical framework on the fly. I have friends who use AI to brainstorm for every paper, others who refuse on principle. Most are somewhere in the middle, using it for some tasks and not others, but with this constant low-grade anxiety. Is this okay? Am I cheating myself?
That anxiety is a data point. It signifies a system in transition without clear signposts. And the long-term impact gap is wide open here. We have lots of data on short-term outcomes, grades on AI-assisted assignments, student satisfaction surveys. But what does this do to critical thinking stamina? To the ability to build a complex argument from scratch? To genuine curiosity? The Writing with Machines article asked this directly. If we reconceptualize student work as collaboration with AI, what happens to the formation of the independent scholar?
It goes back to intentionality. If the learning objective is formulate a unique thesis, then starting with an AI-generated thesis and picking it apart might be a brilliant way to learn what a bad thesis looks like, and by contrast, what a strong one requires. But if the objective is simply produce a 5-page paper, then the AI does shortcut the learning. The panic is that many traditional assignments were actually the latter, and AI has just exposed that.
Bingo. In my CS world, we've had this for years with Stack Overflow. You could just copy-paste code. The bad professors banned it entirely. The good ones taught us how to use it, find a solution, understand why it works, adapt it to your specific problem, and cite it. This feels like the same cycle, but on steroids and for every discipline. The history major now has a tool that can draft an essay on the causes of the French Revolution in 10 seconds. The prohibition is tempting, but it's not sustainable. The preparation is harder but necessary.
So the path forward, shaped by the data, seems to be this evidence-based adoption. Not adopting every shiny tool, but asking, what specific pedagogical problem does this solve? And how do we measure if it's solving it without creating new, worse problems? This requires a kind of humility from institutions. The McMaster report was compelling because it didn't just issue guidelines, it documented a process of community consultation, pilot projects, and iterative policy development. They admitted they didn't have all the answers.
And that's where faculty voice is so crucial, but often missing from top-down edicts. A professor of medieval literature has a completely different set of concerns and opportunities than a professor of data science. A one-size-fits-all AI policy is doomed. It has to be a framework that individual departments and instructors can adapt. The Universal Design Study hinted at this. AI's power might be in its ability to differentiate and personalize, but that requires the instructor to be the designer, not just the consumer of AI outputs.
Can I give a student perspective on the assessment problem? This is the biggest daily friction. If you're going to allow AI, you can't just give us the same old research paper and say, have at it. The assignments have to transform. My best example is from a philosophy class. Instead of write an essay on Kant's categorical imperative, the assignment was, use an AI to generate 3 different counterarguments to Kant's principle. Then, write a defense of Kant that specifically refutes the AI's strongest counterargument. Include an appendix where you critique the AI's reasoning and note where it fundamentally misunderstood the source material. That was brutally hard. It required deep understanding, but it also taught me how to argue with and against a machine. That's a 21st century skill.
That's a brilliant example of institutional transformation at the classroom level. It aligns the assessment with the new reality of the tool. But scaling that requires support. Most professors aren't instructional designers. They need time, training, and maybe even team teaching with educational technologists. This is where the real investment needs to go, not just in ChatGPT licenses, but in human infrastructure.
And we have to talk about the regional and institutional disparities again. A community college instructor is teaching 5 courses a semester. Where do they find the time to redesign every assessment? The risk is a 2-tier system. Innovative, high-resource institutions that prepare students for a hybrid human-AI world, and struggling institutions that, out of necessity, either ban the tools or ignore them, leaving their students unprepared.
The data on that is just starting to trickle in, and it's worrying. So pulling this together, the discovery from this week's deep dive is that higher education is in a period of rapid, disruptive change centered on AI, but the core challenge isn't technological, it's pedagogical and systemic. The critical gap is our understanding of long-term learning impacts. The path forward isn't a uniform answer, but a commitment to evidence-based, pedagogically intentional adoption, with massive support for faculty and a relentless focus on equity.
And from where I sit, the students are waiting for that guidance. We're not a monolith. Some will always try to shortcut, but most of us want to learn, and we're pragmatic. We know these tools are in the workplace waiting for us. We want to be taught how to use them wisely, critically, and ethically, not just told to avoid them or left to figure it out alone in the dark. The institutions that figure out how to do that, how to move from prohibition to preparation, are the ones we'll remember as having actually educated us for the world we're entering.
It's the ultimate test of the mission, isn't it? If the mission is to preserve and transmit knowledge, prohibition might feel right. But if the mission is to prepare adaptable, critical thinkers, then we have to meet the world where it is. The data shows we're at that crossroads. The next few years of choices will define institutions for a generation.
And we'll be here, tracking those choices in the data. Thanks, both of you. This is exactly the messy, human, complicated picture the numbers were pointing to. The story isn't in the percentage of schools using AI, it's in the thousands of individual classrooms, like Aisha's philosophy class, where the real transformation, for better or worse, is taking place. Next week, we zoom out to look at the systemic funding models that make all of this possible or impossible. Until then,